Taub from the Unapologetically Jewish podcast. I'd like to introduce you to our next guest. Our next guest is an amazing, amazing reporter, host of a podcast, Negar Mojtahedi. She is the reporter for Iran International and the host of the podcast, I for Iran, in the podcast series. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's dive right into it. So you're working for Iran International as a reporter. You've been covering everything for so long about Iran. Let's start where we are today and then work our way backwards and then forwards again. So where do you think we are today in terms of the war that's happening in Iran right now?
I think we're very much in a continuation of this war. You know, there are a lot of Western analysts who are coming out right now and bringing up Trump's comments that he made today in the Oval Office, where he said that they're making some sort of negotiations with the Iranian regime, that there's been progress. In fact, he even said that there is in some ways already regime change because it's not the same people. Therefore, there's been a change in the regime. I think this is all just one big play. I don't take it for what it actually is. On the surface, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Number one, you have the Iranian regime denying that there's any talks going on in Islamabad and Pakistan with Kushner and Witkoff. Even if there is, I mean, so what? What are you going to negotiate about right now? And what is it actually going to lead to? I think that this is really both sides actually stalling at the moment. You've got the Trump administration that really wants to calm the markets down after he made that announcement that he wants to hit the energy infrastructure of Iran and gave them an ultimatum of 2 days. Now, if you're Trump and you're dealing with the Iranian regime, you make an ultimatum, you better stick to it, which he didn't, which is why he pulled back and said, oh, actually, we're in talks, therefore I'm postponing it by 5 days. He made that announcement Monday morning when the markets were just opening. The markets did go up. I think it was for that reason. You have the Iranian regime who, for them, surviving means winning. So as long as they are in power, no matter how fragmented, no matter how much of a disarray, they'll take it too. So I think there's, a lot of issues going on right now, and there's the political and security war, the whole purpose of this war in the first place. And then you've got now energy and economics. And I think Trump just wants to push back away from that and keep it on that level. The fighting is still happening. There's still strikes. There were still cluster bombs that were sent into Israel as well. There's still bombs going off in Iran. So it's very much still in the works and still happening. I don't think that we're headed to some sort of settlement of this war. And honestly, it would be a huge betrayal to the people of Iran, to the people of Israel, to the people of that region, because you cannot leave a wounded animal, right, in place, because they would become an even bigger threat. But again, I don't think that we are headed in that direction. I think that we really are headed to the end of this regime. I recently spoke with an Israeli security insider on my podcast, I for Iran, Brigadier General Amir Avivi, who said to me,
Right.
he believes that we are weeks away from an uprising in Iran where the conditions can once again, or for the first time, become safe for the Iranian people to rise up. And he promised that Israel would have drones. There would be some sort of U.S. air power to protect the people of Iran. As you know, tens of thousands were slaughtered on January 8th and 9th for just walking on the street and asking for a change.
Well, that's the biggest thing, and we see that in the news, and media picks up on all the things that Trump is doing. It's so misleading, and I often think it is misleading because he's doing it on purpose. I think some of the things he's had to claw back a bit, especially with the Monday morning announcements
It's
and
tactical.
whatnot.
It's for a broader strategy here. This is
Right.
a tactical move by Trump, in my view.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the same thing. And then when you look at what they're doing and everyone's saying that this is going to be a lost war. Listen, anybody who doesn't like the presidency is going to turn around and say that. That's an angle they're looking at. But when we look at what's happening on the streets, when you spoke to General Avivi, who's also a great, I love that guy. But when you look at what he's saying, that we're weeks away, what does that look like? Say we're weeks away. How does the Iranian people on the ground, what needs to be ready for them to take that stand? Because we saw what happened back on the 8th and 9th, right? So honestly, there's got to be some fear in them to do we have to rise up again, but when do we do it? Because the next time we do it, it has to be the last time we do it.
Exactly. And that's the exact same question that I asked General Avivi. And he said, to the point where the repressive apparatus of this regime can no longer harm the people of Iran. So in my view, that would be, obviously an elimination of these forces. Now, the problem with the IRGC is that through Qasem Soleimani, who was the head of the Quds Force, who was responsible for the regional terror and proxies and really creating this ring of fire around it. In fact, there was a former Mossad chief, Yossi Cohen, who called him a brilliant person, unfortunately, like kind of like an evil genius, because he really did plan all of this, and it was working to a certain extent. And so really it's about, they decentralize it so much that once you kill one, another one pops up, right? Laurie Johnny's gone as the head of the security. Now you've got this another individual who is very much part of the apparatus. And, I may not have heard his name before as an Iranian, and people inside Iran may not have heard about him as well. But they created this system where it wasn't like a one-man rule. But you really have to not only eliminate that top brass, but create the conditions where they don't have the motivation to fight. Why fight if you're not being paid at the end of the day, right? I mean, if the regime is not able to pay these people to come out, that would give them one incentive, maybe not to do something like this. So the conditions have to be made to make them not fight in the first place. And it goes beyond elimination, because as I said, you kill one and there's another one, right? But there's definitely a lot of disarray and paranoia. And it's interesting, going back to Trump's comments on Monday morning, he had made some sort of announcement in Palm Beach that, about the so-called negotiations, and he's got some sort of man in Tehran. And then Barack Ravid with Axios came out with a report naming it as Ghalibaf, who is a speaker of the parliament, very much part of this regime apparatus. And in doing so, it's interesting because you're going to create more disarray and fear within the regime, because then they're going to go, oh, wait a minute, Trump was talking about a man in Tehran. Are you the man who's been giving information about everyone's
Hmm.
whereabouts? Is it you? And it's going to actually put now a target on Ghalibaf's back, much like it did for Laurie Johnny, where people were saying, oh, Westerners, I don't know why they would say this, but oh, he's pragmatic. No, really, he's not. He's brutal. He was part of the mastermind behind the January 8th and 9th massacre. He's corrupt. He is, or he was, I should say now, because he's dead, but very much ideological, like everything that you could think of. But sometimes I think to myself, do people just look at him and he looked Western? So therefore, he's not wearing a turban and whatnot. Therefore, he looks like us. And the optics of it, I don't understand where any of that came from. But it's interesting now to see that there's now definitely a target on Ghalibaf's back.
Right. So so once we move forward, once we have all these things that have to be in place, there's a lot of working parts all at the same time. What support, we know what's happening there and we know what's happening here. What support here can the Iranian community give to the Iranians back at home? Like what can people do here other than the rallies, which I know do a lot. I know they do. It shows a lot of solidarity. What do you think we can do here in Canada and the US to help that fight keep being move forward?
There's the warfare that's on the ground, and then there's a warfare that's online in the public warfare. I recently did a joint investigation with my friend Jay Solomon at the Free Press, where we looked at the massacre of January 8th and 9th and how the regime was able to flip the switch on the narrative and essentially turn this into one big, oh, well, it's an Israeli plot, it's the
Hmm.
Mossad, completely ridiculous, not an uprising. But unfortunately, their propaganda worked. It really did. It worked with people who are influenced on the far left and the far right. So it wasn't just the
Yes.
left wingers, it was also these MAGA right wingers as well too. The Marjorie Taylor Greens and Adam Media and some Russian bots actually came up in our investigation. Then you had gray zone journalists like Max Blumenthal and those types of
Mhm.
individuals that really help spread this. A lot of it is because yes, they're coordinated with Tehran, but a lot of it is also that they had an uptick in views. So they were doing it simply because also it benefited them. And it also, even though they don't share the same political, they're on the same political spectrum, they came to the same conclusion about Iran, because both these sides, these extreme sides, have a hatred towards Israel and, quite frankly, for Jewish people around the world. And, it didn't help that the former CIA director and Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, I don't know if you remember this post, I was so upset when I saw it. And he goes, oh, for every Iranian walking the street, there's a Mossad agent. I'm thinking to myself, I know you're doing psychological warfare here,
Yeah.
and you're joking, but not right, because then it was used as what we called in our investigation an sort of like an amplifier, because they use that to amplify the narrative as legitimacy, right? And then also the Mossad Farsi, I think it was on December 29th, so before the massacre happened, had posted something like, "Oh, we're with you." Again, I know psychological warfare, but really not a good move there because, again, it was used as an accelerator and sort of validation. And I had people, even non-Iranian Canadians, send me those things as proof that, look, the Mossad is involved. Of course, there is infiltration of the Mossad in Iran. We know that. There's even infiltration of the Iranian spy network and
Hmm.
whatnot, and intelligence in Israel. We've seen some
Right.
arrests
Yeah,
of Israelis
exactly.
who have been working. This is how these types of operatives work. But to say that a homegrown uprising was brought on by the Mossad, it's ridiculous. But unfortunately, people bought it. So I think it's really important to change the narrative. And so far, what I see in Western media, that includes CBC and CNN and all of them, Canada and the United States, is one that is very favorable to the Iranian regime and really, I think, puts Iranian lives at risk and also the lives of Jewish people around the world too, because they're creating a narrative that is very anti-Israel. Joe Kent, for example, he recently resigned from the
Right.
Trump administration and working in the area of intelligence. Well, it turns out, he's a leaker, according to reports that he leaked information. He didn't even have intelligence on Iran that he supposedly had. And he blamed Israel the entire time in his declaration of resignation, whatever you want to call it,
Well, that's the
saying, well,
easy
this is
scapegoat,
Israel's
right?
war.
Israel's the
And
easiest
yeah,
scapegoat. It has been for millennia. So that's
and it's wrong.
part of the
And it's
problem. Very
wrong.
much so. And what amazes
It's
me when
very
you
much.
look at CNN just did a story from the Iranian IRGC missile bunkers. That's
How did
pure
you get in there?
propaganda. Like, you sit there and you think, go back. I don't think, the news media reels what we're doing World War II. We're going into the bunkers in Germany saying, look at the stockpile. Look, it's so insane the way media is pushing this narrative of IRGC the good. It's so bizarre, but not really because we're seeing it happen more and more and more. No matter what we do to fight this evil, Hamas was an evil proxy of the IRGC. There's all these evils that we're fighting, and they're flipping it to somehow protect them.
Actually put out videos and disgustingly proud of what they committed, and people denied it. And it's like, but they put out videos and they said they did it, and you're denying that they did it? They actually put out the videos and said that they did it, and proudly, with pride.
Yeah. And so we have such a great, I mean, especially in Canada, the Iranian community is so big. And people have to remember it's big for a reason. People didn't, it wasn't like, hey, I know what we want to do. Let's uproot our family with nothing to move to Canada.
Yeah,
There's a reason there are
exactly.
so many Iranians that are living in Canada today and the US, but in Canada right now, there's a reason. And we have to remember when we say, when the media talks about, you know, Ayatollah, this and this, and making them look so good, they're truly offending a million people like who live here. And that's a problem. Now, when we talk about the Iranian and Jewish community, I mean, that's a big, we talk about how far back that goes and the support we go, with Israel being involved in this war, listen, the IRGC we see now they've attacked, I think the numbers I saw, more missiles were launched at UAE than were launched at Israel. We have to remember if they're willing to do that, because they're willing to kill tens of thousands of their own people, plus launch missiles across the region. Imagine what they would do the second they got a hold of something more powerful like a nuclear weapon. So
100%.
Israel being part of this war, really, working on it and initiated it with the Americans, which people have to remember when the IRGC in their parliament said, death to Israel, it was after they said death to America.
Yeah,
It's death to, the big Satan, the little Satan. That's what they called them. America is the target, not just the Israelis. And people have to remember that in the end of the fight, that's what they're fighting against. So when we look at the connection between Israelis and Jews, especially, and Iranians, where do you think we can work better together here in Canada? We do the rallies together, and not enough people know the history. I mean, we're learning it now. It's being talked about more now. But really, how do you think that the communities can get together more to really unite and fight this, not just through rallies?
Again, I think this goes back to being able to push the right narrative out there, right? Because it affects all of us. And whether that means putting out a petition or a protest or something, if you've got the wrong voices that are being broadcast on the CBC, say something, do something, take action. Don't just complain about it. Maybe it's a matter of putting out a blog post. Everyone can do something within their own capacity. Maybe going on social media, maybe contribute to an editorial or something of that nature, to really educate people. Because I think part of it is, I mean, part of the problem though is that people will just believe what they want to believe in the end anyways. I think we've come to that kind of society where our algorithm and everything feeds us just what we want to hear. So it is problematic, but at least on a systemic state level, if it could be implemented at least on the news networks that people are getting information out of, I think that's one step forward and something that people can do. And of course, rallies and all those things, yeah, it's very important, especially for the people of Iran. It means a
Yeah.
lot to them when they see 400,000 people come out in
Yeah.
Toronto. It gives them energy and makes them think, okay, we're not being ignored.
Okay, so let's talk about this, about Canada specifically. We hear a lot of talk. We're talking about people leaving Iran, and we saw video footage last or 2 weeks ago of that guy coming off out of the airport. The big talk about IRGC being here in Canada at the number 600, 700. Let me ask you, from what you've done and your reporting, what you know, are there 700 IRGC members in Canada that we
No,
know of, that we
no.
know they have?
No, and I can say that because that's my own investigation. And
Okay.
it's so funny. I've had some politicians like repeat it to me. I was like, yeah, I was the one that broke that story. And I gave the 700 number, but I didn't say IRGC agents ever. And that's what makes us, and that was the whole point of the story. I guess they missed the whole point of the investigation. But the point is that, this number of, and this was just 700 that a lawyer was able to get in his
Mhm.
database. It's probably tens of thousands. I tell you, it's way more than 700. 700 was that lawyer was able to confirm through, phone calls and data that he received from people, things that he knew himself, like just anecdotally in the community. But there are tens of thousands of people, not just 700, that's in that database of Stop IRGC, but people connected to this regime. So they're not necessarily IRGC card holders, right?
Right.
And that's how they're able to do it. And that's what makes this even more dangerous because it's not easy to identify who these people are unless you know in the community. You might see somebody might walk by you and I could tell you, oh, that person's father is money laundering, da da da. And you go, what? Because they don't look like that individual that you saw in the video coming in. They look like you and me. And they dress like you and me. And they're Western and they drink alcohol and they're not ideological, but they're laying the groundwork for infiltrating and influencing Canadian politics and society, right? A lot of them own like dairy farms and they've really invested in Canada. Some of them came in through passports that they bought at St. Kitts and Nevis and a lot of those island countries that you can just buy a passport and then it was legal for them to come in Canada, I found through my investigation. A lot of them came in through this $2 million Quebec investor line, which after the
Right.
investigation, they stopped providing that because they realized, oh, wait a minute, this is being used and abused. Well, yeah, if you have millions of dollars, it's easy to come in. And then how difficult is it for me as an Iranian Canadian to help refugees and protesters that escaped coming in through Turkey and Greece and whatnot? But if you've got the money, no problem. So a lot of these individuals again are money laundering, are having influence operations here, are the kind of the middle people, the family members, and they're not necessarily regime officials. Sometimes they could be like ex-regime officials that they were at one point
Or regime
in time.
adjacent, like they're part of their
Yeah, the
network.
government, for example. Yeah,
Yeah.
so they may not be IRGC, but they could have been the minister of something. And you see that with a lot of the deportation orders that are happening. A lot of them were minister of whatever, worked in the technology ministry area. It was part of, again, the repressive apparatus that had, these Chinese-made security cameras that had AI technology to see if you were wearing your hijab properly, for example. So they are involved in that. And another thing is it's difficult to their exact connection to human rights violations and abuses, right? Even if they were with the government, you have to have a specific thing to prove it. But Canada does have universal jurisdiction, which is amazing. We're privy to that. So we saw a case in Sweden of Hamid Nouri, who was part of the massacre in 1988 of hundreds of thousands
Mhm.
of people against the regime. He ended up going to Sweden, and because of universal jurisdiction, they were able to arrest him. That means that you need not commit the crime in the country that you're in.
Right.
Unfortunately, they did a prisoner swap. The Iranian regime had something over them and they got him back and he's free and happy in Iran. But the point is we do have universal jurisdiction. So there are means and mechanisms. And follow the money. You can
Yeah,
trace the money back. There are front companies that are obvious to, I think, people within intelligence and policing. They know who they are. So if the money's coming from Dubai, it's not even coming from Iran. That's the thing. It goes through different stages before it gets to
yeah.
Canada. But you can find out, go to the bank and do an investigation. So I think they need to do a better job of that. But again, I think it comes down to the fact that they're not IRGC card holders necessarily. And then they can go, oh, well, the government can say, well, that's misinformation
Right.
because we looked it up and there is none. And it's like, well, it's much deeper than that. And it's so much more systemic that makes it dangerous.
And that's the problem. So, and then we have two things. One, so yeah, deport them back to right now, where in a country where they are safe, essentially for now,
Yeah.
or right, or leave them here because we don't know what to do. It's like we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't, and that doesn't help the people of Iran there if they're sent back, and it doesn't help the people of Iran here if they stay here. So the
I mean, if there was universal jurisdiction and there was a way to try them for their crimes, that's something. Or if you could freeze their assets and they no longer have access to that money, that's something, right? So, but they have to do something.
Right. And so we need to push our Canadian government to do more about that. And that's
100%.
part of it. And that's, I think, where I think our communities can really work together to do that, because there's a lot more strength in numbers. We know that. When there's a million plus fighting for something, all saying the same thing. Now, the challenge always is Persians, Iranians, Jews, we all kind of live close by. So it's not like we have multiple MPs across the country. We kind of live in, we live in our little suburban areas, and we've got like, maybe 20 MPs to rely on because we stay in our communities, which is a good thing until we have to fight for the other things we want to fight for. So we do have to push that and have that conversation. So I know what I do is I do work with the government. I do lobby them to do more education, right? We have to educate them first so they don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, I've had conversations of, did you know this? What are you talking about? Right. So we have to bring that information to the government to let them know exactly how it breaks down first before we say, get rid of IRGC members or look into their finances. We have to explain to them they may not be actual card carrying and break that
exactly.
down in that report you did. And that's part of the challenge we have. Because let's be honest, most members of parliament or provincial parliament or MLKs, they just want to go to work, do their thing, go to a pickleball court opening and go
Yeah,
home. Right? This is work.
exactly.
This is not easy. And
Nope.
it's a lot of work. So working together with our communities to get them to both understand what's happening on both our sides, right? And then bring it forward to the government.
Exactly, 100%, and it goes down to work because I remember during that investigation, I confronted an immigration consultant who helped bring over one of these regime-linked officials, and I said to him, "Well, I mean, you're Iranian, you know what you did." And he
Mhm.
goes, "Well, he came here legally," and fair enough, he did. He did come here legally, and he did have one of those passports that you could buy and then come to the country through some sort of investor line. So a lot of people fall back on that. Well, why should it be my problem if the government allows it? So that's another thing.
Right. Okay, so let's look at just, the next couple of weeks, how we get this moving forward and what's the biggest message we can give people who are listening to this. Because I'll tell you now, that piece we just talked about, how the IRGC really is here but not here. No, people don't understand that. And that's a big piece that I think people have to be educated on. What are we looking for? I mean, I'm not going to walk down the street and start looking at everybody else. And everybody looked at that one guy who came in off, from the airport and followed him for days. I always see that as more of a distraction than anything else. Right? Like it's so obvious. If he's part of IRGC or if he's one of the judges or whatever it was, yeah, we have to address that. But how do we address, how does the average person, other than going to our MPs, address what's happening?
Matter of talking to people within the community as well, because we know, as I said, you might see one of these individuals and think nothing of
Owns
it
a flower
because
shop. What do I know? How do I know if
yeah,
he's buying a
exactly.
penthouse for somebody, right?
Right? Exactly. How would you know? But people within the community, we do know. And it eventually it comes out. So I think it's a matter of talking to people in the community, flagging certain individuals. How can we get that to whatever jurisdiction you're in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it starts with a conversation.
Okay. And so what message would you give to everybody who needs to band together, who's scared to get out there and rally and get involved?
I think it's important to know that no matter what obstacles we face in Canada, it's not what you're going to have in Iran. You're not going to be met with a machine gun rifle and bullets, right? So I think it's important to keep like perspective in mind and
Hmm.
how important it is to be there for the people of Iran and for the greater region at large, right? Because they're all under attack right now from the Iranian regime, who the Iranian regime is a sinking ship, and they figure, okay, well, we're going to go down. We're just going to take everyone down with us. And that's their mentality, unfortunately. So I think just having that courage, knowing what people are going through, and trusting Iranians. So many times, even I get lectured by people about what is good for Iran. I've learned to just kind of get it out of my head. But I'll go into my Facebook and I'll see all these posts against the war and what Iranians want, from people who are not even Iranian. And I comment on it. At first, I was a few weeks ago at least, and then I stopped because I realized, you know what, this is not working. They don't care. They just see the name Trump associated with it. Maybe if it was Bill Clinton who did this, they wouldn't be feeling this
Right.
way. They see Trump, or Netanyahu, it's a trigger, and therefore anything that is against Trump is good, including the
And
Iranian regime.
that's the most amazing thing, like that whole I was talking about earlier today on a call, that Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is, and it's on both sides, the left and the right, and it's that horse is getting closer and closer. I think they're overlapping at this point in time, where anything they do, anything that Netanyahu does, they're the evil access. Even talking to Americans, I was talking to an American friend of mine the other day, and I said, he doesn't know enough, and I said, you do know that when the regime took over in '79, the first thing they did was take over the U.S. embassy and kidnap Americans. That was
They
the
started
first.
this.
Yeah. They were the first thing that was the first thing they did. We've moved so far past that. We don't even talk about that. It's just inside the immediate, and, no one's talking about the cluster weapons and cluster bombs that are being sent over to Israel. That's a war crime. I actually was with somebody earlier today who showed me what those look like when they hit the ground. They look really small up in the sky. They're 20 feet long each.
It's terrible. And what's happening in Israel, I mean, of course, there is, for the safety and security of Israel, they can't report on everything, right, that's happening. But it's really bad. There are some areas that are, I mean, it's like a crater of
Yeah.
just.
Last couple of nights have been horrific, and it's one of those where you're not hearing about that in Iran. It's being more precision. You're not hearing about civilians being hurt or murdered. I don't know if there are. Are there?
Are now.
I'm
There
sure.
are, because as the war progresses, unfortunately, this is just, I mean, as war continues to go on, it accelerates, right? And the nature of war and the region of where the expansion of zones where you have to hit, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, there's a story of a case of I can't remember the woman's name right now. I'll look it up and send it to you after, but she was the head of like an orphanage for girls that are in
Mm,
rehabilitation and have some disabilities and stuff. She always said, I'm the mother of 400 girls.
right. Yeah.
And the IRGC wanted to stage their operations inside there, hoping that maybe Israel or the United States would hit there, and then all these young girls would get killed. And guess what she said? She said, no way. These are my girls, and I'm going to protect them. And she's been arrested, and we haven't heard from her since. So these types of things happen. Or, in terms of civilian loss, you could live near a nuclear scientist, or you could live
Hmm.
near someone and
Right.
not know it. It's not that the intent is to, I think with the Iranian regime, the intent is to kill civilians in Israel and around, right? Because they're going, especially in like Qatar and Dubai and those places, they're hitting civilian infrastructure that doesn't withstand missiles. But
Hmm.
in the case of Iran, yes, there are civilians that are being
Yeah.
killed. It may not necessarily be the intent, though. I don't like to use the word collateral damage, because people are people, right? As this continues on, and as this regime stays in power, I mean, they're not letting go. And I always knew that. I mean, listen, they came in with violence, they sustained their regime with violence, and now they're going to go out with violence, which
Well, that's
means
it. They
blood.
actually they have to be eliminated entirely. I don't think people
They
realize that.
have to now. There's no way
Yeah.
you can go back.
Well, that's it. There is absolutely no way. There's, like, going back to what we talked about earlier with that the point plan that Trump is talking about. There's no plan. There's no ceasefire. There's no way anybody walks away with this saying, yeah, okay, they're not going to enrich uranium. They're definitely going to pull back on
So they have more reason
having.
to do it.
Right. This is just enabling them to say, we're going to go harder. And once we get it, it's the first thing we're going to do. And I don't think people realize what that actually looks like. People don't see war. And that's why people, when they see it online, they're like, oh my God, this is horrible. It is horrible. But it gets a lot worse if they have the ability to do what they want to do. And I think people don't realize that's the real enemy. This is good and evil. And when
It
you're.
really is.
Go ahead,
Oh, I was gonna say, like, if you look at the images, if I show people some images from January 8th and 9th, it's not the war. That was what the regime did to the people. And the images coming out of there and the loss of life of civilian is 10 times more than what's happening right now.
that was devastating. You see what they don't care about. We saw last week, you know, rockets and missiles fired into central Jerusalem, into the old city, where it hit 400 meters from the central of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Dome of the Rock, and the wall. And I do believe
It's a
that's
holy
when,
site for all religions.
right. I think that's when Saudi turned around and went, hold on a second. Wait a second. You hit that dome. There's a problem. You hit the Alaska Mosque. There's a problem. So we've all known this. They don't care what they hit. They don't care if they take out that entire old city. If it takes out all of our sites, yours, mine, this, that, doesn't matter. They just want it gone. They just want to make this, they want to be the winner. And they're the only winner in this at the end of the day is the Iranian people, or they're the losers. That's it. One or the other. So I hope that that it goes where it needs to go, because there's only one way for it to go. So that's it.
100%.
What would you say the biggest thing you would say right now to people listening who maybe need a little bit of hope based on what your connections are, what you hear, what you report on? What's the biggest thing we can do for people here at home in Canada, and the biggest thing we can do for people over in Iran? What are the two biggest things? One each.
For the community here, I would just say check in on them, kind of like after October 7th, I was always checking in on my friends, give them a hug, see how they're doing, talk to them. It's extremely psychologically, it's emotionally, people still
Mhm.
have a lot of immediate family and there's a blackout. There's a digital blackout. You can't get a hold of people. Like it's horrendous. And I would say to help the people of Iran, if there's any way to for some sort of legislation to bring about Elon Musk to help with Starlink inside Iran, because he still hasn't, which is actually quite surprising. I think he helped for, was it UAE or something, some sort of neighboring country, but it still hasn't happened inside Iran. And Starlink is really expensive, the people who do have it inside Iran. There's legislation in the United States. There was a bill that passed, but for some reason it hasn't gone to the next stage. And for the VPNs. So
Right.
it's unusual for me because these are the things that you can anticipate. This is the stuff that they do every time, right? So there was planning ahead of time. So I'm quite surprised to see that it didn't get to the next step. So I think from here, if there's any way to help the people of Iran get internet so they can at least document the crimes of humanity from this regime, it's key.
That's massive. And so if we were to, start tagging Elon a lot more and really call
Yes.
this out, really will help, because there was rumor they were doing it during the beginning of the uprising, but not
And then they
much. And then
didn't.
but that was the word that they were saying,
Yeah.
because it involved Mossad. Mossad was doing it. They're giving right. It always was back to. I'll tell you, the Mossad is like the new Chuck Norris. All those Chuck Norris memes. Like,
It just appears
they do
everywhere.
everything.
He died. Oh, I feel bad laughing now. He just died yesterday.
That's okay. Apparently, he laughed at the memes too. We're good. So, but that's why he's front of mind. But you know what I mean. But it's we have to make sure that we keep this conversation going. We can't let it stop, because it's been long enough, and the attention span of everybody is that thing still going on? Right.
Yeah.
We have to keep that conversation. Even rallies have kind of
Yeah.
toned down, right? And we have to keep that going forward. And I know that there's a big rally in Washington, I think,
20.
this week,
Yeah.
which that will bring a lot of people, a lot of people. So hopefully that brings more attention again if it's covered. So listen, Negar, I want to thank you so much for coming out today and educating myself and everybody else who's watching and listening. And we're going to get this out as quickly as possible. I appreciate it. I hope we can have you back as things get more and more involved. And hopefully we can have a really big breakdown when all of this comes to a transition.
So let's hope. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for raising awareness.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to sign off. I'm Matthew Taub. Thank you so much for joining the Unapologetically Jewish podcast. And we will see you all next time.